Welcome, one and all. My name is Anna Lumpria, and I am a wayfinder. I work for the Cornwall Memory Cafe Network, supporting carers and people living with dementia to access services, make referrals, and really help them find a way to get more support. This is part of Disability Cornwall, and we've decided to create this podcast interviewing experts and people with lived experience on dementia to be able to share all sorts of interesting and informative and supportive information. So sit back and enjoy, and also share the podcast with your friends. It's relaxed and inclusive and welcoming, and thank you for listening. Welcome everybody to our Dementia Toolkit video series, a one-stop shop answering all your questions on everything dementia related. Simple educational advice from people with lived experience and professionals in their field. We aim to provide support that's personalised to help you on your dementia journey. Thank you, Karen, so much for your time. Really kind of you to be here. And can you just introduce yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, hi, my name's Karen Malkin. I'm the clinical lead manager for the Dementia Liaison Service in Cornwall. And we are a team that work with care homes looking after patients and residents with advanced dementia. So we go in and support the carers in the care home and the clients in the care home, and also families as well. So support those with their loved ones.
Amazing. And when you say support, do you mean making sure they're getting the right care, that they've got everything in place?
Yes, so we make sure that basically they're being looked after to the best of the care home's abilities, and their medications are managed, their care's managed well, the risk is managed well, and they're in the right environment. So we work quite closely with adult social care and other healthcare professionals throughout the NHS, really. GP surgeries as well. So it's quite a tight-knit group.
A really strong network supporting people with advanced stages of dementia, you say?
Yes. Yeah. So we're normally involved towards the latter stages of a person's dementia journey, when they can no longer be looked after within their own home. So they're looked after in care homes. And it could be for a number of reasons, but they tend to come our way towards the end.
Right. Okay. So today we're talking about certain things that carers and people living with dementia in the early stages of their diagnosis could start to consider that might support them in the later stages.
Yeah. Yeah, so a good thing in the early stages of dementia is obviously to address mental capacity, because obviously as the dementia progresses, a person will lose their capacity to make decisions in their own best interests. So it's always a good thing to, in the early stages, once you've first got the diagnosis of dementia, or even going through the stages of memory assessment, to discuss capacity, because capacity can fluctuate, and it's also assessed for specific decisions that you need to make throughout your care journey, really. And capacity is a bit of a tricky one, because it has to be assumed unless it's proven otherwise. And that can be tricky at some points. And it also needs to be decision specific as well, to the time and place of the decision. So whether it be they go into a care home or they want to make the decision to stay at home with carers. But the problem with capacity is, once you've lost that capacity, then everything then has to be done in what we call the best interests of the client. But prior to that, there are things you can put in place. So you can actually appoint somebody to be what they call a lasting power of attorney.
Right.
And that can be a loved one or a friend or somebody very close to you, that it's all done via a solicitor, but it's an actual legal documentation for somebody to act in that person's interests once they lose capacity. So that would be in two ways. So they can act in the capacity of financial and property, and they can also
Okay.
act in their health and welfare. But
Right.
that
So
has to be done before you lose the capacity to make that
got
decision.
you. Got you. So with the financial side, that would be potentially paying bills for
Yeah.
you and decide, making choices about your finances. With the health one, it might be deciding what the next steps were, all of those kind of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. There's a wealth of information on lasting power of attorney on the government website, the uk.gov
Yeah.
website. Absolutely masses of information there. You can also have what they call an advanced care plan.
Okay.
Again, if you can look on the government website again for that, and there's also a really good lot of knowledge around advanced care planning on the Dying Matters website. And
Dying
that's,
matters.
yeah, so that's
Okay.
a care plan that you put in place whilst you've got capacity to just ascertain what your thoughts are, what you'd like prior to losing capacity, because that way we can ensure that we're acting in someone's best interests.
That sounds amazing. So it could be if you wanted to go into a care home that you would want to go to a particular one, or
Yep.
that you would, as much as possible, stay in your own home.
Yeah. In all instances, we always aim as healthcare professionals to act in someone's best interests. But that can become tricky if there isn't any lasting power of attorney in situ. There can be arguments amongst families, etc.
Yeah.
If it's all set up prior to then, you minimise
Yes.
that distress at a later date. So I
Yes.
would always advocate for anyone in the early stages to actually put everything in order so that they're getting what they want rather than what somebody else might
Absolutely.
decide for them.
This is fascinating. Thank you, Karen. With this advanced care planning then, and that's not the power of attorney to begin with, would you do that still as a legal document with a solicitor? Would you
It's
do that
not a legally
online?
binding document. No,
Okay,
it's more of a preference.
got
But
you.
most healthcare professionals would try to follow it as much as they could in that
Yeah.
person's interests
Yeah.
at the time.
Okay.
But yeah,
And
it's not a
it doesn't
legally
have to
binding
be,
one.
no. Okay. So it
No.
doesn't have to be legally binding, but it's a
Yeah.
preference that if the person didn't have family, loved ones, people around,
Yeah.
and they couldn't have a power of attorney, they could have one of these advanced care plans
Yeah.
when they were in their early stages of dementia,
Yeah.
and then potentially adult social care would do their best to honor their
Yes.
desires.
So if somebody doesn't have a lasting power of attorney and they haven't got capacity any longer, then if there's no close family and there's issues with making the best decisions, we can apply to the court of protection for what is called a deputy to act in that person's best interests. So in
Okay.
that situation, it would go to the court of protection. They would advocate a deputy to act in that person's best interest. But if there was an advanced care plan in situ, they would then aim to act in as many as they as in those wishes as they could
That's
in
amazing
that person's best
information.
interests. So it's
Yes.
really
So,
good to get the planning done in the very early stages.
okay. So what I'm hearing then, I'm hearing, first of all, on diagnosis, it's really good for the person with the diagnosis and potentially their loved ones to sit down and talk through the stages potentially of what's going to happen and what their preferences would be. And the law says that they do their best to honor the patient, the client, the person living with the
Yeah.
dementia as best as possible. The next step would then be to do their best to get a power of attorney, even if that person still had capacity to get it set up. And it
Yes.
doesn't mean, does it mean
Yes,
that it's
It doesn't actually come into force until that person is deemed to lack capacity. So even if they've got a lasting power of attorney set up and they maintain their capacity for 10 years afterwards, that does not come into fruition until they are deemed to lack capacity. So they've still got control over their care,
their finances,
until that time when the disease progresses.
And because I think that's a concern for a lot of people, is that why, that they're worried about setting up power of attorney and then one of their relatives then taking their money off them or making decisions, putting them in a home, and them still having capacity and not wanting that.
Yeah, if they're still deemed to have capacity, mental capacity, then they make the decisions.
Great. And so who then would decide? Who would it be? Would it be a doctor or a health professional?
Yeah, it's always a healthcare professional that does the capacity assessment. So that could be a GP, it can be your consultant, it can be a number of people. So adult social care also do capacity assessments as well.
Got you. And that might be a yearly assessment or every couple of years if things change.
So it's normally decision specific. So if it was to decide on what the best plan of care was, whether it was to be cared for at home or cared for in a care home, then that capacity decision would be specific to that.
Got you.
Yeah, that's so it's fantastic. Not a general overall capacity assessment. It's actually decision specific. And again, we've got to remember that capacity can fluctuate as well. If somebody's got a infection, they may be deemed to lack capacity whilst they've got that infection, because they may have associated delirium. And if they've got an associated delirium, they may lack capacity while they've got the infection. But once they've been treated for the infection, they may regain capacity. So it swings and roundabouts. So it has to be very carefully done.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So if people wanted to start the process of an advanced care plan, that's something that's not a legal document. They can do that at home and just store it somewhere safely. And power of attorney, they can either go through a solicitor of their choice or it can be done online through the government website. Yeah, if you look on the government website, it will give you pointers to each. You can do there's a lot of information on the advanced care planning and lasting power of attorney. There's also things on there about court protection, and you can also look on under the Mental Capacity Act. There is a list on there for decision specific choices under the Capacity Act. So there's a wealth of information out there. Always remember as well, you've got the Alzheimer's Society website and Dementia UK websites, which are a wealth of knowledge. And you also mentioned earlier Dying Matters. Yes, Dying Matters is a really good source of information as well. So what's on there? What's sort of on Dying Matters? That's normally around the advanced care planning and thinking about end of life. So we're going to come to an end then, Karen. If there was one final thing you'd love to say to carers listening or to somebody that's just got a diagnosis or anything, what advice would you give them or what would you say to them? I would say don't be alarmed by the diagnosis. The early stages are your best and opportune moment to make your decisions for your care and ensure that others act in what you would like for your dementia journey. And each and every one is different. Oh, thank you so much for your time. It's been fascinating and really informative. Thank you. Thank you.
This video was produced by Discover Voices, part of Disability Cornwall and Isles of Scilly. To check out all of our content, simply search Discover Voices on YouTube.